we're both Maliki in fiqh, so we prayed Sadr
Oh, yeah.
there. Yeah, I'm Maliki fiqh now, Athari Naqida, right? So
Do you listen to our own Mufti Abi Layth?
oh, just for comedy. I think he's hilarious. I think he's hilarious.
No, but you know what? Behind the
his
scenes, though, obviously we speak. Me and Abu Layth we got a good relationship.
yeah,
As a person, and
yeah,
I always gotta say this because
yeah.
naturally I'm from Birmingham, I get asked.
Sure, right.
As a person, he's a very nice brother. Very
Yeah.
nice.
So, and the question about is lying haram? I don't believe lying is haram, by the way. Did Noah alayhi salam live for 950 years? No, he did not. Huh? You going against the Qur'an? You kafir? She said, and Jesus spoke to them as a little, let's say as a 2-3 month old baby, and he started to speak and he started to say, you know, hey, this. And they said, oh wow. And then they said, okay, we won't stone you. This is what a lot of Muslims do believe this. Unfortunately, it's not actually true in my understanding at all. But a lot of Muslims believe this. And as a story, it sounds nice. He said, oh, they used the verse of the Qur'an about Ibrahim alayhi salam being thrown into the fire. Allah says we saved him, but does that mean he was thrown in the fire? Or Allah saved him by using some other means that he managed to escape? Now, the heat of this, Allah has mentioned, Kuni bardan wa salaman, be peaceful and be cool to Ibrahim. Now, were any mediums adopted in how this fire had a cool effect in terms of its heat upon Ibrahim alayhi salam? Was it through a wind? Was it through a cool breeze? Was it through some... Allah doesn't say. And when Ibrahim said, oh my Lord, show me how you bring the dead to life.
Is he in a bath?
What many people have understood here is that Allah tells Ibrahim alayhi salam to collect these birds and to cut them into pieces. And then to place these pieces, spread them out, and then call them and the birds will come together. That's how many people have understood this. Some people disagreed with that understanding. Now me, I've never really read that I've never understood that verse in that way. Get 4 birds, get them, take your time. Nurture them to some extent.
Oh, for God's sake.
Grow a bond with them. Amilhunna ilayk, fasurhunna ilayk. Incline them towards you with affection. Then place them far and wide. Thumma da'un. Now call them. With that affection that you have, they come flying towards you. And then there's the incident of Lut alayhi salam, where the Prophet Lut has some guests, and when they come, the people in the village are homosexual. They're actually bisexual, but they're homosexual, strongly homosexual. So they are like, oh my God, we definitely need those guys that have come to Lut alayhi salam's house. Now, could it be that those people weren't angels, they were just people? Not the town people, obviously, that would be silly, them being angels, but the guests of Lut alayhi salam. So I think to that I'm quite inclined that they may have most likely just been people, not angels. Now, what you do get is you get this up until now even, like if you get a strong upstream wind coming from the Gulf of the Gulf of Aqaba, it will push back the water depending on the pressure of the wind. Now, what's interesting is if there was a hurricane, and it has been documented, so several historians and other people have documented when they've been present at the Gulf of Aqaba and there's been a hurricane, and how it's actually pushed back for quite excessively. It's pushed back the entire water, and what it actually does is it pushes it and it actually raises the water. The hurricane does. It does like a wall. Quite astonishing.
Shut up, man.
And depending on, so there's been a lot of research done into this. So if the wind, for example, the hurricane, if it had winds of speeds of, like, let's say 80 miles per hour, which is very reasonable, it could have pushed the Gulf of Aqaba, the sea, the kind of water there, to anything between 600, 700, 800 yards back. It could have easily done that. And it's interesting that when the wind stops, how research will show, and even actual events, the water just gushes forth. So it's interesting. So that seems to be what had actually happened. And it was a natural phenomenon. So let's give an example of, people have asked me the stick of Moses, Musa alayhi salam. And they've said that why, this, when he threw it, it became a snake. Now, in my understanding, that it was not a snake. Okay, when he threw the thing, it was not a snake. Now, in this story, where he mentions that, do you remember when awayna ila sakhra, that when we rested by the rock? So they set off on this journey and they go to sleep by this rock. In my understanding, they remain asleep. And it is in their, like, it is a vision that they see. Like when they're getting up and they're setting off and everything, that was all still, they were still asleep. That was all part of a vision. Remember when you killed, that there was a body you killed somebody, and then you got into a dispute over it. Wallahu mukhrijum ma kuntum taktumun. And yet Allah was to expose that which you were planning on concealing. فَقُلْنَا ضَرِبُوهُ بِبَعْضِهَا. Now from here, people say that they make that connection with the verse of the cow. Because here Allah says, and we said, strike it with some of it. And a feminine pronoun is used. It. So here the understanding is it is referring to the cow. Although Allah hasn't said that, but that's fine, we can go with that. But Allah says, and He said, strike it with it. Strike him or the person, the corpse, with it. كَذَلِكَ يُحْيِي اللَّهُ الْمَوْتَ وَيُرِيكُمْ آيَاتِهِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ. And that is how Allah brings things to life and brings the dead to life, and He shows you His signs, and in the hope that you may be people of intellect. ثُمَّ قَسَتْ قُلُوبُكُم مِّن بَعْدِ ذَلِكَ. And then Allah goes on to say, and then your hearts hardened after that. Now this, you see, this verse doesn't state anywhere that the dead body came back to life. كَذَلِكَ يُحْيِي اللَّهُ الْمَوْتَ وَيُرِيكُمْ آيَاتِهِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ. And that is how Allah brings things to life. Generally, when Allah says that Sulaiman alayhi salam allamnahu mantiq at-tayr, this kind of bird whispering and things like this, this is, as many of the mufassirin, like people like Sheikh Allama Abdul Karim al-Athari in his tafsir Urwatul Wuthqa, and other people say this is the same as people who, it's a skilled art that some humans possess in being able to communicate at a low level with animals, like horse whispering, like the way they train horses, or the way people communicate with dogs, or the way people communicate with certain birds. So Sulaiman alayhi salam was given that as a gift, to be able to kind of whisper, that bird whispering. That's what it didn't mean that he had conversations. Like somebody had asked about Hudhud. Hudhud was not a bird, as many people have said, but rather it was like, if you read the actual verse of the Qur'an describing Hudhud, and on several occasions it seems very clear that this is a particular person that Sulaiman alayhi salam is addressing. So if you read it, and all the verses, actually, when they speak of Hudhud, you know, that when he says فَتَفَقَّدَ الطَّيْرِ, that he couldn't find, and they say he called this group Tayr, because they were like birds, that they would be like falcon-eyed, that they were the intelligentsia.
What? What is he talking about?
So the ant as well, I mentioned that the ant and Sulaiman alayhi salam, that there's two responses to that. The main understanding, as I mentioned in the tafsir, I go through this in much detail, please watch my clip. The main thing is he was shown this as a vision. So a powerful person from this division says, I will bring you. Now, what does bring you the throne mean? Was Sulaiman alayhi salam asking them to go get her throne? See, we zoom in, that's fine. Go get her throne. We zoom out, that's a huge problem. Why? It's theft. Now, what's an alternative narrative that actually makes sense? And once again, in the tafsir Urwatul Wuthqa, Sheikh Abdul Karim, Maulana Abdul Karim al-Athari,
Zindiq.
Who's that? Who is that? Who's that?
Some random
that
Zindiq.
this was a person who he had detailed descriptions, this kitab, of key features of landmark, whether they were events or landmark kind of icons. He had these things, and he said, I've actually got a descriptive, detailed description of this massive throne, the way like the peacock throne was described in so much detail with all its finite things, qualities to the British. In a similar way, this had been described, and he has it written. He's saying, I can make you from that. So meaning it will be spot on, not just this person saying, you know, he can make it from his knowledge, like he's heard about it, but I have a detailed, descriptive, and people say there were drawings of it and things like this, and so I can make it.
This is unbelievable. This is unbelievable. Unbelievable.
It does mention, the Qur'an does mention that these two figures, Harut wa Marut, and most likely they were probably two rulers who were deemed to be pious. They weren't angels, but people referred to them as like angels. This is what many people, so if you read the tafsir of Ibn Ashur and other people, this is what they explain, that they weren't actually angels, but people used to call them angels because they thought that's how they, you know, were inspired by these people, and they taught certain techniques. Now these techniques go back to this thing. It doesn't say anywhere they taught them a magic that was like how you're picturing magic, like, I don't know, Harry Potter magic. It just says that they taught people how you can split people up and cause enmity. يفرقون بين المرء وزوجه. They can split up a couple. How? Like, think about it. People do it today. The kind of tactics, the kind of politics, the gameplay that people use to split people up. And this is untrained people do it. You know, they gossip here, gossip there, set people up, do this. And that's the unqualified guy doing that or girl doing that. Imagine if you were skilled at it and you were around the people who weren't skilled, but you taught them the art of persuasion. That you do have that as a general belief, that Muslims feel that Mary had a virgin birth, although no verse in the Qur'an says that she had a virgin birth. Then I mentioned some ulama like Maulana Abdul Karim al-Athari, Allama Tamanna Imadi, and these people said that it was a natural birth. And that's not the case, but the miracle they highlighted was that when she got married to Joseph, that Joseph would abstain and he was not interested in any kind of intimacy. And hence when the angel came and she said, but how can I have a child and I haven't even been touched? That after that she did conceive, she conceived naturally.
لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله.
Most likely this is referring to the incident which is referred to in the Gospel of Luke. That in the Gospel of Luke, at the age of 12, Joseph and Mary bring Jesus to the festival. But he's sitting in there debating the high priests. So what happens is they are really kind of flabbergasted and they're frustrated with him. Because who does he think he is? He's just a kid. Yet he's getting the answers right. And he's running rings around some of them. Now Mary finds him. When Mary finds him, this is where they say to her that he's yours. Is he your child? And they say you and him. Like, what an insolent, rude, disrespectful child. Like, she doesn't know what to say, and plus a woman wasn't given a high place to speak. So she points at him and he responds, Qala inni Abdullah. And hence they begin by, when she says, look, why don't you just ask him? I don't know. They say, كيف نكلم من كان في المهد صبيا. How should you want us to speak to somebody who was only a child yesterday? Because he's 12 and they're belittling him. Man kana fil mahdi sabiya, who was just a boy. You want us to speak to this boy who was in the cradle only yesterday. So when we say things like he made the blind see, or he brought the dead back to life, or he brought birds that were clay and made them into living birds that could fly away, that this was all a parable because Jesus spoke in parables. He was one of the few prophets who ever spoke in parables. And this is what he was doing, as in a parable, for this is what his people had become locked in. It was like they were a clay of, a bird that had no real use. But
what are you talking about?
Of the good news. Hence the gospel, which just means the good news, was not only to animate it and bring it to life, but it would liberate it and it could fly away. So when you're saying things like the people were dead, you would be saying that they were perceptibly dead, but not actually dead. So people, for example, who may have had a very low kind of pulse and things like this, perceptibly dead, but Jesus assisted them, and there's only two people, Lazarus, and you're going to get one other incident. You're not going to get many cases of Jesus bringing the dead back to life. And the blind as well, that he healed them. According to some theories, you see, Jesus had traveled in his early age. That's a theory, once again, by certain Christian sources as well, and certain Buddhist sources, that he traveled to the Buddhist regions and studied with them.
Wow.
And then came back.
Wow.
Now, according to some of these theories, that Jesus learnt certain meditation techniques and certain kind of Eastern healing methods that weren't popular in the Middle East. So things like I'm not saying it was, but like Reiki and things like this that are very Eastern, where people heal with certain kind of, they have certain methods. So there's a theory, I'm not saying this is what it was, but there's a theory that Jesus had picked up certain healing techniques and healing methods whilst he was away. And then when he returned, he had these practices. He also, his whole thing about patience and was very kind of Buddhist-like too. Others feel that he was put on the cross, but he just didn't die on the cross. And that's the understanding that I would go with, that I would feel that Jesus Christ was put on the cross, but they didn't successfully crucify him. Some of the descriptions of the hellfire are super frightening, like drinking boiling water. I don't feel, or any description of the afterlife is simply symbolism.
Wow.
It's not a literal description.
أنكر النار
All these
والجنة.
things mentioned in the Qur'an are just, they kind of, it's imagery to motivate or to incentivize or to intimidate.